This is a public health announcement brought to you by Heather Shepard,
the Primal Pioneer. Live an outdoor life.
This is the Primal Pioneer podcast, a show dedicated to helping you achieve optimal health by making radical lifestyle, dietary, and environmental shifts to support forward movement with your health. I'm your host, Heather Shepard, radical health practitioner, gut health specialist, and homeopathic doctor in training. When I was 23 years old, I suffered a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. This shifted my life from a super athletic type A kind of person to, well, literally being a slug. The side effects of my TBI left me sidelined from physical activity for nearly 12 years. I tried every modality under the sun, desperately yearning, trying, hoping to get better. It wasn't until I stepped outside of the conventional medical model that I saw real lasting progress with my health. And I achieved my version of optimal health by deep diving into the areas of the body, particularly the mitochondria and emotional energetics that most notably affect and impact our health. Sadly, however, these are areas of health that most healthcare practitioners overlook and underconsider today. Today, I help thousands of people overcome both acute and chronic ailments using my nature and science-based radical approach to health. During this episode of the Primal Pioneer podcast, I talk about carb metabolism, why carbs make some people overweight, why carbs can lead to cancer, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, and how one major molecule known as deuterium, a substance found in certain foods, is at the heart of these modern disease epidemics. I also talk about the layers of health, what deep healing entails, and how you can start to deplete or remove deuterium from your cells to improve carb metabolism. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. This episode is part 2 of the Carb Metabolism series. Last week, I jump-started that series off by talking about the connection between light, carbohydrates, and what determines whether carbs have a supportive, neutral, or negative impact on your health. If you have yet to check out that episode, it's an eye-opening show for anyone in the keto, paleo, or diet world, as it starts to deep dive into diet in a way that exceeds far beyond the surface approach we've been taught around eating, which primarily focuses on carbs, fats, and proteins. Really, that's old news. It's a surface approach, and we need to dive much deeper if we want to start making the forward movement with our health that so many people truly, truly desire. Really, when it comes to your ability to digest carbs without them having a negative impact on, say, your blood sugar levels, your weight, your energy levels, cancer risk, is not dependent on avoiding the carb-heavy foods we've been taught to shun and blame for all of our modern health struggles, but rather is highly dependent on your sunlight exposure, especially versus your artificial light exposure. So head over to episode 24 to learn more about this primary basic connection between nature, sunlight, and carb metabolism that the diet world has been turning the other cheek to for decades. Currently, I run a private Facebook group called the Keto Cancer Solution. And many of you who've been listening to me for a while in this show are familiar with that group. And it's a group where a lot of people come who have cancer and they're looking to get dietary advice for approaching cancer. And a lot of people are shocked when I start to say, just stop counting macronutrients. Really, just stop counting the calories, stop counting the macronutrients. That's really going to create a headache. It's going to be so stressful. You're going to get in your head about diet. It's going to get into this very linear, robotic place. And I understand why it was formulated. People usually like to have very structured rules to follow. And they think if they don't follow those structured rules that they're going to be doing something wrong. This hasn't been my experience with a quote unquote therapeutic keto diet. I say that a little bit loosely because when I work with clients, I don't advise them to count macros. If they want to, completely up to them. But it's not something that I tend to advise. And the reason being is I haven't found it to be uber effective. And it also gets people really in their heads. And most importantly, we totally disconnect from our food and disconnect from nature. We just get in this robotic pattern of, okay, we need to eat a lot of fat. And then all this fat starts piling into the diet in all these different types of ways. You know, we get fats from nuts or fats from oils or fats from butter. And there's a lot of misinformation out there on what a healthy fat actually is. A lot of people who have cancer, who try ketogenic diet, you know, they try like vegan keto, which is really high in liquid vegetable oils and liquid oils. And these are really, really inflammatory to the body. So people in that group are really shocked when I bring up, hey, we need to consider your light environment first because you likely got cancer, at least in part because you're not able to metabolize, use carbohydrates effectively or properly because you have a broken cytochrome 1, which is NAD, NADH. I talk about that in detail in the previous episode, but really your ability to improve carb metabolism and restore health and function to that NAD, NADH at cytochrome 1 in your mitochondria is so much dependent on your light environment. So today I'm going to deep dive even more into this topic of carb metabolism because it's a really, really misunderstood topic. And it's a big driving cause of our modern day diseases. When it comes to diet, we have to take some very important laws of nature into consideration before we say reach for a banana in wintertime or a watermelon for, someone with cancer or obesity. This is one of the areas of health that we need to start addressing, looking at more deeply because it's highly unconsidered in our world of healthcare and dietitians today, but it has one of the biggest impacts on our health. And this all goes back to really our food availability because present day, we can go into the grocery store and there's literally unlimited food availability despite season or location. So what I mean by this is our over availability of foods from anywhere in the world in our grocery stores is creating big health issues, including poor carbohydrate metabolism and high inflammation levels. So to really understand this connection between carbs, are they causing inflammation in my body? Are they contributing to negative health effects in my body? To really get this connection, we have to discuss this topic of deuterium. Some of you might be familiar with deuterium. Few people in the alternative health world have been talking about it for a couple of years now, but honestly, we really need more people talking about this and learning about it because when deuterium enters the wrong places of your body, this is one of the molecules that can make or break your health when it's in the wrong places. There's certain places in your body that it actually belongs in, like your plasma. But there's certain places in your body where it's super destructive, highly inflammatory, and leads to every chronic disease, and that is your mitochondria. So what is deuterium and why do you need to be concerned about it? For the science nerds out there like myself, deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. Now, I'm just going to give some context here on the science realms, and I'll break it down into super simplistic ways as well so everyone can comprehend this. But deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. So both hydrogen and deuterium have the same number of protons, which is 1, right? Hydrogen is the first element on the periodic table. Deuterium, or D2, has 1 neutron, where hydrogen doesn't have any neutrons. So you might be thinking, what's the big deal here? It's not like 0 to 1,000 or 0 to 100, right? And really what this breaks down to is that deuterium weighs more than hydrogen. And this might not seem like a big weight difference, but it's absolutely huge. It's a huge difference at the anatomical and mitochondrial levels. For anyone out there concerned about their health, for anyone who struggles with their weight, for anyone who has type 2 diabetes, is pre-diabetic. If you struggle with autoimmunity or poor energy levels or cancer, keep listening, because your ability to process deuterium and deplete it from your cells weighs heavily on your current state of health and potential to reach your version of optimal health. I'm going to be slightly provocative. It's really unlike me, huh? But I'm going to ask you a question here. So, how many diet books or diet plans have you read or heard of that teach you how deuterium impacts your health when it gets into your mitochondria? I'm going to guess no one out there is like raising their hand. I haven't seen any books on this topic yet, but I do sense they're coming, and I hope to be a big part of this educational movement for the diet and alternative healing world, because until we address this topic of deuterium and how to remove it, or, we call this deuterium deplete it from our cells, people are going to continue to crash and burn when it comes to trying to achieve their health goals. So they're going to continue to go down this path. And maybe you've been there. I have. You crash and burn. You get super frustrated. You give up for a little while, but then you dust yourself off. You get back up again, and you take another swing at committing to diet and exercise as main ways of helping you succeed with your health goals, right? I mean, who hasn't done that? But I've done that. As someone who's tried this primary focus of health, diet plus exercise, and failing time and time again and being disappointed time and time again, it has become super clear that if you don't first remove deuterium-containing foods from your life, especially during certain times of the year, or as you're trying to achieve a specific health goal, you can try diet after diet and one exercise routine after the next without lasting success. I wish it weren't true, but this has been my experience and the experience of with so many of my clients. First, it's important to learn about foods that are deuterium bombs, so to speak, and why they're a huge block to healing, so you can incorporate this as a primary approach to your health goals and achieving those. So let's start with foods that contain deuterium. Okay, whenever you hear the word deuterium and you want to link this to foods, think of watery foods, okay? Particularly fruits. So we have watermelon, bananas, cucumbers, mangoes, papaya, right? These are some foods that have a much higher deuterium content than, say, the foods on your standard ketogenic diet type of foods, specifically animal fats and animal proteins and coconut products, which are foods that are virtually devoid of deuterium. Now, I hesitate to say that because the standard ketogenic diet for some people could include those liquid vegetable oils or really poor quality fats, which in fact do contain deuterium. So on next week's episode, I'm going to be going into fats and oils more. Somebody recorded in a really great question with regard to cancer, with regard to a ketogenic diet and the type of fats to eat. And I'll deep dive into that topic a lot more next week. But, this is one main reason why a ketogenic diet works for some people who have cancer, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetic, obesity, because this diet tends to be a lot lower in deuterium containing foods, okay? So yeah, it's naturally low in carbs, of course, but when you cut carbs, you also cut deuterium levels as well from your foods. So we can say that a keto diet is by nature a deuterium depletion type of diet, especially when it sans those poor quality liquid oils. And that includes things like avocado oil. I know people want to slay me when I say that, but because that's the whole trend now, avocado oil, this and that. And it's just like the cauliflower trend. It's like you can make cauliflower pizza, or, there's 500 plus different recipes of, how to use cauliflower in place of grains and stuff like that. While cauliflower might be okay for some people, the liquid oils are really not okay for anyone, just because of how they're processed and because they have a really much higher deuterium content than, say, a stick of grass-fed butter, which is virtually devoid of deuterium. So what happens when people with cancer, type 2 diabetes, or those who are obese, they've gone into keto with success and start to add more carbs in? However, and maybe you've had this experience just in your own personal healing journey, but then they start to gain weight or their cancer markers increase and or they become more fatigued and often develop leaky gut. You learned why this happens in the last episode about carb metabolism and how a keto diet is only a band-aid solution to deeper imbalances in poor mitochondrial health. Really, we need to be using the keto diet as a therapeutic strategy that buys the individual time until they've adequately healed and improved their mitochondrial health. A keto diet isn't going to improve how you process and digest carbohydrates. It's not going to heal a broken cytochrome 1, NAD, NADH, right? It's not going to do this thing. But you can use the diet, and this is how I use the diet in my own private practice with people who have cancer. Use the keto diet as a way to buy your mitochondria time to heal. So use the keto diet with the Sunlight RX. Then we see that the mitochondria are healing. Cytochrome 1 is healing. It's getting to a much more functional place. Then we can start to add in carbohydrates without them having a negative impact on the body. No cancer, no weight gain, no obesity, no type 2 diabetes. Now, I'm not talking about going out and ordering a pizza and eating that. We're talking about healthy carbs. We're talking about, seasonal fruit and seasonal, like starchy vegetables and things like beets and carrots and these sort of things. We're not talking about Papa John's pizza or, these sort of things. We're talking about healthy carbs and your ability and your body's ability to handle them. We want to use the keto diet. I think a more wise approach to the keto diet is we have to be combining the Sunlight RX so that we get to the deeper layers of, what's causing the poor carbohydrate metabolism in the first place, what's driving up glucose or HbA1c levels, what's doing that. It's a poor light environment. So success with the keto diet is not about counting macros and carbs for the rest of your life, but is about improving your sunlight exposure through the Sunlight RX. And there are people talking about this in the health world. There are actually some medical doctors talking about this in the health world. Not many are making this correlation. So when I bring this topic of increasing sunlight exposure, mitigating artificial light exposure and the keto cancer solution, some people are like, wait, I just wanted a recipe for like cauliflower crust and you're telling me about sunlight and I'm totally confused right now. So a lot of people are in that boat just because this is a lesser known topic right now. So hopefully this podcast, Keto Cancer Solution, and my blogs and articles are going to really help to bring some more education around this super important topic. All right, let's head back to deuterium. So let's say you eat a deuterium bomb. Okay, what foods would be considered a deuterium bomb? Let's explore that just so you know. Fruits, grains, legumes, starchy foods, and one of the biggest deuterium bombs is anything hydrogenated, okay? If you just listen to that word, hydrogenated, and reflect back on what is deuterium, an isotope of hydrogen, adding hydrogen to a food will increase its weight and transforms hydrogen, H+, into deuterium D2. So anything hydrogenated, even if it's a coconut oil that's hydrogenated or a palm oil that's hydrogenated, which in their non-hydrogenated forms are super healthy, but once they're hydrogenated, forget it. It's a total deuterium bomb. Partially hydrogenated anything. So we'll see a lot of partially hydrogenated soy oil or corn oil, or any oil can be partially hydrogenated. That's a deuterium bomb. Corn syrups, high fructose corn syrup solids, these are the worst forms of deuterium, meaning they're the most detrimental, have the most rapidly negative impact on health. So that's like, those are the biggest deuterium bombs when it comes to foods that are created by nature. The biggest ones are fruits, grains, legumes, and starchy foods. Now, I just want to reflect because this is really important to get why deuterium is so detrimental and pro-inflammatory to your body. because you learned in last episode that the food you eat enters your cells, your mitochondria, in the form of electrons and protons, and they move across your cell membrane with the goal of being converted into energy, oxygen, and water. Okay, so let's say you eat a banana, and that banana is broken down into protons and electrons, and that is going to move across your mitochondria in hopes to be converted into energy, oxygen, and water. Now, if your carbohydrate metabolism is insufficient, that likely won't happen fully. Okay, here's the thing about deuterium and carb metabolism and your health. Remember, deuterium is heavier than hydrogen. Deuterium isn't supposed to be in your mitochondria. When it is, it's like adding maple syrup to your gas tank. So your body, however, has built-in mechanisms to deplete deuterium from your cells, okay? So it doesn't slow it down, so it doesn't act like maple syrup in your gas tank. And one of the main ways that deuterium is depleted from your mitochondria and cells is via UV light, sunlight exposure. Ding, 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 Sunlight RX for improved carb metabolism, because nature created these foods, right? If we weren't supposed to eat them, they wouldn't have been created. Okay, these foods are here for us to eat. However, we have to be in the right environment in order to process, to deuterium deplete these foods. So that's why if you go into your grocery store in the middle of January and you live in upstate New York, right? And you reach for the banana because your doctor told you, eat a banana a day to keep your potassium levels sufficient so you don't spike your blood pressure, right? You're going to reach for that banana. Side note, okay, high blood pressure is 1,000,000% rooted in poor carbohydrate metabolism, pre-diabetic situations, and points a big finger at blood sugar imbalances. So this is one of the beginning signs of diabetes. So now when you reflect on everything we've been talking about here today, is the banana that you eat in January in upstate New York really going to positively impact your potassium levels and blood pressure? No, it's going to do the exact opposite. But doctors don't know this, and they tell people, think about all the people in nursing homes that never get out in sunlight and they're just eating canned soup and bananas to help regulate their blood pressure and, instant oatmeal. Literally, they're just eating deuterium the entire day. And that's why they're basically like comatose and they have no energy. They're not present. They're totally checked out because it's just maple syrup going across their mitochondria until eventually, they cannot live on that sort of diet. You cannot live in that way. That's no way to live. So what's the key here? Okay. What's the key to eating these foods that contain deuterium without them having a negative impact on your energy levels, on your mitochondrial health, on, inflammation status, etc.? Because you're sitting at your kitchen table eating that banana. It's wintertime. You're thinking you're doing a beneficial thing for your health, but really you're just adding a crap ton of deuterium to your system. So what's the key here? How do we deal with this? Okay, we need to consider the environment where deuterium-rich foods are grown in, right? Because all food contains and carries that light blueprint. We learned in sixth grade that photosynthesis is how all the plants grow, right? It has a light blueprint. Now, deuterium-rich foods are grown in very strong UV light. So think tropical plants and foods, okay? Bananas, papayas, mangoes, watermelon. These foods are going to be higher in deuterium, but also things like legumes, also things like more of the starchy vegetables like beets and carrots. Now, those are a little bit less than the fruits and the legumes, but they also contain some. So when's the time to eat these foods? The time to eat these foods is when there's strong UV light outside of your door from sunlight. If you're in upstate New York in January, there's literally zero UVB light present at that time. So your body has no way to deuterium deplete that from your cells. So our issue becomes now with deuterium is that even people who live in strong UV light environments, they don't go outside. They're inside in front of their computer or laptop or on their phone or streaming Netflix, right? Because of convenience, we've kind of been programmed into this indoor life. And what do we do when we're in front of artificial light? It increases our carbohydrate cravings. It totally messes with our endocrine hormones, so it messes up our blood sugar levels. There's literally studies out there showing how exposure to human-made EMFs as well as artificial light, actually you can just get diabetic type of symptoms and tend towards diabetes just by being in those environments. So now think about if you eat a high carbohydrate diet or even a moderate carbohydrate diet, right? And you think these are healthy carbs. Maybe you do like gluten-free pasta or gluten-free pizza crust. Okay, these are still going to be carbs. Or you're getting like, 3, 4, 5 servings of fruit in per day because, you want to strive for 5 and get your antioxidants in, right? But you're never going outside in UV light. So your body is just this inflammation levels just build and build and build and build. And your ability to process and digest and metabolize carbohydrates goes down, 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 and you start to get a broken cytochrome 1, NAD, NADH, and that's when the straw begins to break. That's when you're going to really see things like full-on diabetes, cancer, obesity, and all other chronic diseases. So when it comes to eating these foods that contain deuterium, no, it's not like you have to avoid these foods. You just need to pay attention to nature. So let's say you do live in upstate New York and it's January, right? There's no mangoes outside. There's no pineapple. There's, no bananas. So what is present at that time? There's a lot of protein. There's a lot of animal protein. A lot of people in that area. I know my dad growing up, he was a big hunter. So he would go out and we would eat venison, or we would eat elk, or we would eat turkey, or, these wild. He would go out in the wild and hunt these animals. Even if you're not a hunter or your parents weren't or whatever, if you focus more on a ancestral ketogenic diet for that location during those times of the year, the winter months, you're going to be avoiding deuterium heavy foods and you're going to be supporting your health just by doing so. Really, the take home here isn't that deuterium is bad. So before you jump the gun and think awful, horrible nightmare thoughts about deuterium, okay, hold the phone. Deuterium isn't wholly bad and awful. There are actually some parts of your body, like I said previously, that actually rely on deuterium for its function. And one of those places is your plasma. But one of the places it does harm, and the most harm to your body, is when it enters your mitochondria. It causes things to be sluggish. And so the key to health, my friends, really is improving your mitochondrial health. This is the basis of my work with people. And improving mitochondrial health largely includes depleting deuterium from your cells. So to do this, just by naturally eating a more seasonal diet and getting your Sunlight RX on. And if you're inspired to learn more about deuterium after listening to this podcast, please know, I want to mention that not all deuterium in your body is bad and dangerous. There's a lot of people out there who just say deuterium's horrible. You don't want it anywhere near your body. You don't want any of it. And it's not true. You actually need it in some places, as I mentioned, the plasma. It only becomes a problem when it gets in the wrong places, your mitochondria, and compromises every single physiological function in your body and drives inflammation levels sky high. A lot of people struggle with finding the right diet and meal plan to support not only their health, but their taste buds as well. As a nutritionist with over 12 years experience, I want to help you answer your deep, burning questions around food, diet, meal prep, special diets, and how to swap unhealthy ingredients for healthier ingredients. And I'm opening the doors for you all to ask your questions around this very topic. And these questions will be answered right here on the Primal Pioneer podcast. All you have to do is submit your question to me and I'll answer it during the show. Here's how you can submit your burning nutrition, food, and diet questions. Number 1, on your phone, go into the voice memo app and record your name, location, and question. Please feel free to keep your name anonymous if you'd like. Feel free to share about your health experiences, your cooking failures or successes, and personal experience with food and nutrition. And then number 2, upload the file to me at ketocancersolution@gmail.com. That's KETO cancersolution@gmail.com. I'll play your question on the episode and we'll answer it in full detail to help support your dietary food adventures and healing process. I can't wait to hear and answer your questions all about food, nutrition, and healing. Now, let's get back to the episode all about deuterium and carb metabolism. My daily healthcare, self-care routine, my radical approach to health that I incorporate into my daily life and those of my private clients revolves around improving mitochondrial health. And this needs to include deuterium depletion at the cellular level. Until you do this, you will always struggle with inflammation. You'll struggle with carbohydrate metabolism. You won't be able to deter from your keto diet without feeling these negative health symptoms come back, and without struggling, with your weight and possibly cancer. Because a cell overtaken by deuterium, it's a sick cell, and it's a beeline to every chronic disease today. I'm going to share a little story with you about a client who's near and dear to my heart and their experience after deuterium depleting their cells with my radical health protocol. If you're listening to this, you're going to know who you are, and I send you a big heart. I send you a big hug your way. Okay. So this individual struggled with obesity. They don't anymore. And they struggle with hormone-related cancers of the breast and colon. Now, I want to mention that this individual is doing amazingly well to this day and has turned their entire life around after their cancer diagnosis. Their story is super remarkable. It's totally inspirational. It moves me every time I think about it. But I want to bring this individual up because it is the hallmark picture of a system overloaded with deuterium, right? It's obesity and cancer. That is 2 deuterium bomb diseases right there. When they started my deuterium depletion protocol, what was the result? Vomiting. Okay. Lots and lots of vomiting. And I don't want to scare any of you off if you're like, wait. I don't want to puke during this deuterium depletion process. I'm totally not signing up for that. I don't have to suffer in order to be healthy. And I want to just say, most people actually don't puke. A lot of people actually feel, detox symptoms. Most people don't puke. But the key thing here is that I want to take home and share with you here is that the more inflamed you are, the more apt you are to have a detox reaction in the beginning of your deuterium depletion process. A lot of people, right, they go on a ketogenic diet, and what happens? They get the keto flu. So they literally will get flu-like symptoms. And a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, it's like all the fats and your body's adjusting. What's going on is you're actually engaging in a form of deuterium depletion, and that is what drives the detox reaction or the keto flu, in my experience. So I also want to say here, because if you're, a little freaked out about deuterium depletion and what it might, bring up for your physical body, we need to remember that Western medicine is based on suppression, okay? Drugs, its treatment method, its approach, it's 100% suppression based. It literally can't cure any disease. There's no disease it can cure. If we want to heal our deepest parts, remember, pathology gets pushed down into layers of your body. So literally it can go, you can start with a pathogen on really the surface layer. And this over time gets pushed down into deeper layers into the body. And to fully recover, the pathology actually has to make its way back up to the surface so it can eventually be removed from the body. This is the opposite of suppression. And really, it's the basis, it's the foundation of homeopathic care. So I invite you to keep this in mind, because when we're faced with discomfort or pain in our physical body, we want it to go away ASAP. We want to get back to our lives. We don't want to be out of work, or we don't want to be, just bedridden or laying on the couch or watching Netflix for, several days. At least I don't, but I want you to keep in mind that every pain, literally every symptom, it's expressing itself for a reason. And that reason, at least one of those, is to help you address that layer of health so you don't push it deeper into your body. So it's like waving a big red flag at you like, hey, look at me, look at me. Can we address this layer? Don't suppress it, but this is the layer it's on, and let's address this. So let me give you an example here, because you're like, what are you talking about? Really, I'm not quite getting it. So let's take just, for example, a really, really common pattern of how this might look, from starting to a surface layer to going deeper in the body with disease. So, for example, let's say you got a lot of strep throat or ear infections, which are often strep bacterial related, at least in part. You got a lot of these as a kid, right? So what happens? Antibiotics, of course, like that's what we are taught. That's the remedy. We go to antibiotics. So we might have several rounds of strep. We might have several different times of our life, especially as kids, that we have ear infections. Strep, antibiotics, strep, antibiotics. Okay, right? But then what happens down the line? Let's say you get into your teenage years, and what happens? Wicked acne, maybe even eczema, right? And so then you get prescribed like antibiotic face ointments and face creams. That's what they gave me. And I was like, Mom, if you just took wheat out of my diet and dairy, I wouldn't have had wicked bad acne as a kid. Because when I started to read that, those correlations are so closely linked to acne, and I removed wheat from my diet and dairy, my acne literally went away. So this is kind of the trend we're on, though. Okay, so let's say you get acne or eczema, and you get either like some steroid creams or some antibiotic acne ointments, you put those on. Okay, then a couple of years pass, and what happens? Well, you get mono. You suddenly have like Epstein-Barr or mono. Not everyone gets this, by the way. So, maybe you get pneumonia or bronchitis. We can swap some of these things dependent on the individual, right? And so then what happens is typically another round of antibiotics. So every time your body presents a symptom and then you take a suppressive drug, that bacteria or pathogen does not go away, even though your symptoms might clear those specific symptoms. So let's say you don't have strep anymore, your throat's not sore. It doesn't mean the antibiotics worked. What it means is that antibiotics pushed that pathogen down to a deeper layer. It did its job of suppression. Eczema goes away with the steroid creams. Wow, I'm cured. No, you're not. You push the eczema into a deeper layer of your body. I've done this. This isn't like making fun of anyone. It's just that our system teaches us total crap about how to approach the things, the negative health things that we're faced with. Okay. And it does a really poor job of giving us or explaining, a real helpful treatment method. So let's say, okay, you had mono, maybe you had bronchitis or pneumonia then, and you did the antibiotics again. Well, then a few years go by. Some people, this is immediate. It doesn't have to be a few years. But then you start to get some joint pain and you're like, my knee always cracks and does this funny thing. Or, my shoulder always is like super painful and I can't really raise my arm that well, but it's just joint pain. So, whatever, I've tried some massage and it doesn't work and, it'll go away temporarily. So this is a typical pattern. Some people, when they get joint pain, what happens? If it gets bad enough, Aleve, ibuprofen, Tylenol, maybe they'll go to their doctor for an even stronger pain med. The disorder gets pushed down into a deeper layer. Okay. So one day, then, a few years later, you go in for a mammogram or a colonoscopy or, something, and cancer shows up. And you're like, wait, I haven't been sick. I've never been sick before. Why do I have cancer? I don't understand this. But it's a really, really simple explanation. It's that we have suppressed. We've just gone under this blanket motto of how to treat our modern ills, and it's all based on suppression. And so when that cancer diagnosis comes up or a different chronic ailment or disease, a lot of people tend to be shocked because they're like, wait, I was never really sick. I wasn't that sick. I wasn't like cancer sick. So where did this come from? And I talk about this in greater detail in a recent episode I did all about the immune system. So you're welcome to check that out if you want to learn more about these different layers of health and how pathogens get pressed down deeper into the body. And so I bring this up. It was kind of a long side, but it's kind of my way. It's kind of my thing. So I bring this up because detox reactions, like, somebody could experience when they're starting to deuterium deplete their mitochondria, these can sometimes be a big part of the healing process. It's like one layer that the disorder is starting to come through, right? So as you start to heal, that disorder starts to come to the surface. So one of the ways we like to see, or I like to see anyway, how a client is progressing, are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Are the symptoms they're experiencing coming more to a surface level? Okay. So what would that look like? Like somebody with cancer who, maybe had joint pain. So let's say they had cancer and then we start doing some work together, maybe some diet, some deuterium depletion, maybe some homeopathy. And then they suddenly get joint pain again. And they're like, wait, this is an old symptom I used to have. I shouldn't be having joint pain. That's actually a sign that the pathogen is moving more towards the surface of your body, right? Because it's going in opposite order of when you experienced it. So you had the cancer, then the joint pain, and then, maybe the symptoms of mono or bronchitis or pneumonia. And we're not talking full on, but you might get some symptoms of these. If somebody were to tell me they had, cancer, we start working together, and then, as a teenager, they had eczema and they start getting eczema again after our work together, or, as part of our work together, I'm going to say we're on the right track. That's amazing. The pathology is going more towards the surface, and it's a very positive sign. So deuterium depletion, when you start to do that, and if you have a detox reaction, and there's some other signs to look at to see, is this actually a positive reaction that the pathology is moving more towards the surface of the body? So many people out there are actually catching on to the benefits of deuterium depletion. There's a lot of talk going out there in some of the paleo worlds and some of the keto worlds, some of the medical world, not much of the medical world, but a little bit of it. And like I said, once you start to research, a lot of people out there say, all deuterium is wholly bad and terrible and it's a nightmare and all this stuff. It's not, okay? And that's really, really an important thing to understand before you go off to the races with, somebody's deuterium depletion protocol. I want you to go in with wisdom and education around this subject. So what happens with anything when we start to learn more about it, here come, a shit ton of gimmicks and promises and modalities and treatment methods for deuterium depletion, right? Now, I want to talk about one of the most common, because if you go and research deuterium after this episode, this will likely come up. So one of the trendy places I see deuterium depletion devices or modalities is through the promotion and selling of DDW, or deuterium depleted water. Now, let's just be honest. It's true that poor quality water has more deuterium in it and can be super inflammatory. It can contribute to weight gain, obesity, cancer, and other chronic conditions. This is why when somebody asks, my clients, what kind of water do you drink? And they're like, oh, I use a Brita for my city water. Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that because it's going to be filled with deuterium and chlorine and fluoride and all of those things. And that's not going to be a healthy way to drink water. Dasani, any of the really horrible commercial brand water owned by Pepsi and Coke and stuff would highly discourage. Now, some people may have done some testing on the deuterium depletion for certain waters. Okay, you can check those out. I'll tell you about the water I like to drink here in a second, but really, poor quality water does have more deuterium in it and can be super inflammatory, okay? So it can contribute to all of our chronic health conditions, even fatigue and weight gain. But the real question is, and always needs to be, when it comes to this deuterium depleted water, does it really work? Because a lot of these devices and products around DDW are a bit expensive. So it's not something you just want to shell a ton of cash out to for it not to work. So does it really work? In my experience and reading studies and people's experiences around the DDW devices and what they claim, they're actually not that effective, not for their hefty price tag. And I really suspect that we can do a lot better job, a more effective job when it comes to deuterium depletion in our mitochondria and the water we drink. So when it comes to your water consumption, the easiest way to avoid high deuterium levels in drinking water there's a couple ways. One, you can buy glacier water. Now, why does this have less deuterium? Deuterium has a higher melting point than water. So when you drink glacier water, it's water that is melted from the glacier, right? So that water's melted, okay? It has a lower melting point than deuterium, meaning the water containing deuterium is still ice. So when you drink glacier water, it's water that is melted from the glacier and is naturally deuterium depleted. The next best thing, if you can't find glacier water, is spring water, particularly spring water from your local region, if and when you can find it. So a lot of people with areas in the world that have local springs, your town, your city might have a local spring water. If so, check it out, see how they process it. Is it close to spring water? Is there a way you can harvest that spring water yourself, in a healthy, safe way? If so, beeline for that, okay? That's like the skinny on DDW. And I wanted to mention this as this is the most common area people tend to flock to after they learn about the harmful side effects of deuterium, especially at the mitochondrial level. So to preserve and recover health and improve carbohydrate metabolism, we can't just rely on diet and exercise. It's not going to be effective enough. It's no longer good enough. It's time to lift the bar. And we have to deplete deuterium from the cells. And we also have to stop putting it in the cells, especially without a way to deplete it. What does this mean? No more fruit in wintertime if you don't live in the tropics. Keep grains and starches low during winter months, okay? Again, what does this sound like? It's the ketogenic diet, the natural diet of wintertime that our ancient ancestors consumed. Really, we shouldn't be eating a keto diet in summertime, again, unless we're in the middle of a healing crisis. So like if you get a cancer diagnosis in, it's summertime, then we're going to likely need to incorporate a keto diet in the short term until your mitochondria heal more, because this is going to help to immediately support and expedite the healing process. If you don't have cancer, if you don't have high levels of inflammation, if you're relatively healthy, then we want to be on a seasonal diet pattern, okay? Diet should be cyclical. We should not be eating the same diet 365 days a year. It's not healthy. It's not in alignment with our circadian biology or circadian rhythms, right? So keep this in mind when you're like, oh man, should I do the whole 30? Or there's so many diets out there. It's like, look, if you want to use a diet for a short term, to help you improve your mitochondrial health, use a diet as a short-term approach. Okay, just like I do with the keto diet. No, I don't want people to be on a keto diet for 365, even if they currently have cancer. The goal is to improve your mitochondrial health, to deuterium deplete your mitochondria so that you can actually eat a more seasonal diet, which naturally contains carbs. Now, if you're eating a seasonal diet, some of the foods are going to have deuterium in them. And if you're doing your Sunlight RX, that deuterium is going to be depleted from your cells. It's not going to have this big inflammatory response. No, not at all. When I first started eating a keto diet, I ate a keto diet for a long time and I gained weight and I couldn't eat carbs. As long as I was on that keto diet 365 and I started to eat more carbohydrates, I had a negative response. I would gain more weight. My energy levels would be low. And I had this thing where my heart would beat, more rapidly after I ate carbohydrates. And I was like, what the heck? Like, this shouldn't be, what I'm experiencing. This doesn't feel right. Something's off, my body was telling me. So I was eating fewer carbohydrates then, and I was sicker, much, much sicker than I am now. Until the light bulb started to go off in my head about sunlight. And I started learning about that and getting in, strong sunlight throughout the day on a regular basis. I eat more carbohydrates now than I had eaten in the past, 5-7 years prior to this diet, more carb diet. And I do so well with carbs. I don't gain weight. I don't have the rapid heartbeat after I eat. I don't feel fatigued. It doesn't drain my energy. I'm not inflamed. And it's literally because I changed my light environment and I'm eating more carbs. So when we read this on paper in the diet world, it doesn't make sense from their perspective because that's a limited view that they're taking currently on fats, proteins, and carbs, right? So we really need to incorporate light into our dietary approach as well, which takes the Sunlight RX to a whole other level, really. So if you want to expedite your deuterium depletion process, which will allow you to process carbs like a champ, seriously, sans all the negative side effects, get your body, your skin as naked as a baby in sunlight. Sunlight is queen when it comes to so many things around your health, including improving carb metabolism and depleting deuterium from your cells. The big deal with eating bananas, cucumbers, watermelon, and tropical fruits, legumes, and grains in winter when you're living outside of the tropical regions is that you have no UV light to deplete the deuterium. Now, I will mention there are other ways to deuterium deplete outside of sunlight, one being cold hydrotherapy, which is why this combined with the Sunlight RX is a huge part of my mitochondrial boosting and hormone healing work with people and in my everyday life as well. Getting to the root of your chronic health struggles really needs to start with learning how to deuterium deplete your cells. And by doing so, your inflammation levels will start to go down, your blood sugar levels will start to regulate, cancer risk and reoccurrence will drop drastically, and your energy levels will skyrocket. I'm telling you, this could take time depending on how inflamed you are, depending on what layer, that pathogen has been pushed down to in your body, okay? This could take time to really get all of the deuterium out of the mitochondria, but there's ways to definitely expedite the process. The Sunlight RX is a huge one. So my question for you is, who's all in when it comes to healing these deeper layers of health? Anyone? If you answered a hell yes to that, stay tuned because next week's episode, I'm going to be deep diving into questions from you, the listeners, around improving hormone health, overcoming cancer, and ketogenic diets. Are they even helpful for those with hormonal related cancers? We'll get into that next week, and I'll be deep diving into those questions for you. See you then. Thanks so much for tuning into the show today. I hope you found this episode all about deuterium, carbs, and layers of health supportive and insightful along your healing path. I know when I started to learn about deuterium and how to deplete it from my mitochondria and my mitochondrial engines, my energy levels, sleep, and mood improved big time. I also lost weight and am now today able to eat fruit and other deuterium-containing foods without the negative side effects because I know how to use sunlight in particular to deplete my cells of deuterium. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could take 1 minute to rate and review. Each review helps more and more people just like you learn the deeper truths about our health and healing and unveils the deeper truths behind what actually is driving our epidemic rates of poor health today. Don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your Instagram stories, and tag me at sunlight_RX. Thanks again for tuning in and see you next week. The Primal Pioneer podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease in the Western medical sense or terms. It is to be used for educational and informational purposes only. The information shared on this podcast and all of Heather Shepard's work is not a form of diagnostic medicine, nor is it a medical treatment. Heather Shepard is a health educator, radical health practitioner, and a trained EMF specialist. And although she has a bachelor's in science and master's education in alternative medicine, she is not a medical doctor and does not give medical advice. Her work and sharing is to be used for informational and educational purposes only.